Well, the Prime Minister today associated himself with this ceasefire that we're told Israel and Hamas will agree to in days or even hours after 14 months of war, 14 months of Hamas holding Jewish hostages.
Are you hopeful a ceasefire in Gaza is imminent?
We have been calling for some time for hostages to be released.
Joining me is Daniel Wild, Deputy Executive Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, and Gemma Tognini, founder of GT Communications and the most excellent columnist with the Australian newspaper. Gemma, what really gets me with this statement from Anthony Albanese today, I mean, it's fine as it was, I guess, but really, if Israel had listened to him and stopped fighting Hamas a year ago, Hamas would still be in charge of Gaza. Israel would be humiliated and in huge danger of yet more attacks, and Hamas would be giving up probably nothing, let alone hostages.
Well, what people here in Australia don't realise, Andrew, is that Hamas at the moment is still firing rockets from the south into Israel, is still vowing to wipe out the Jewish people. This is not a game. This is not something that the ALP gets to impose its, soft Trotskyism, on the only functioning democracy in the region from the other side of the world. We're safe and irrelevant in many ways on the other side of the world, Andrew. But you're quite right. If the Netanyahu government had listened to many of the useful idiots in the West, of which unfortunately our government is one, they wouldn't have gone into Rafah. They wouldn't have rescued the hostages they had. They wouldn't be in the upper hand that they are now. The reason that these hostages have been left to languish, is that the international community as a whole simply didn't care enough about them to put pressure on Turkey and pressure on Qatar and pressure on all of the other proxies that could have brought a different outcome sooner.
But Daniel, I'd like to switch topic. I know you've probably got something to say on that, but you have created probably the biggest news story this week, this debate over Australia Day. It started with a survey from your Institute of Public Affairs showing a big increase in support for the day staying on January 26. Petered up and ran with it, but the Prime Minister dodged giving a straight answer as if about whether he would back a demand that, a change of the regulation forcing councils to hold Australia Day citizenship ceremonies on January 26. Now, there are Liberals, as you know, saying culture wars like this are a distraction and they never fight them. Is this debate, from what you've seen, really a distraction?
Well, it's far from a distraction. It's one of the central issues that Australians care about, Andrew, and the reason why the coalition's ahead on the two-party preferred basis is because Peter Dutton has been intervening in the culture debates, and it's popular. When you fight and stand up for our values, mainstream Australians will back you. We saw that with the voice to Parliament. We saw it with Peter Dutton taking a cudgel to big business, and we've seen it with Australia Day. And as far as I'm concerned, the debate about Australia Day is now over. It's on the 26th of January, and that's where it's going to stay. This election, Andrew, coming up is going to be won or lost on culture, not on economics. I could not name one single coalition economic policy, but I can tell you a range of cultural policies. Keep Australia Day on the 26th, force the councils to have ceremonies, stand in front of one flag, cut migration, get rid of indoctrination out of education. These are all values-based cultural arguments, and this is how the coalition is winning over outer suburban Labor voters. It's not going to be the Teal voters that decide the election, but outer suburban no-voting Labor voters will decide the outcome of the 2025 election, and it's going to be on culture.
Gemma, I do not get why so many Liberal MPs have been browbeaten or whatever into thinking that a debate over national unity, national symbols, pride in country, creating a people out of a collection of tribes is somehow a peripheral, boring, marginal distraction that they shouldn't get involved in. How on earth did that happen?
Well, I don't know is the short answer, but I just want to take 30 seconds of a step back and say that I respectfully disagree with Dan, because I think it is always the economy, stupid. It just always is. I don't know that people would be so interested in culture as a whole if they were, sitting pretty without record inflation, interest rates and cost of services and cost of living through the roof. I think that it's 100% at the centre of the Albanese government's pain. Absolutely, culture plays a role. I believe that. I think people very much want to guard our way of life, and it's about that. I think that's probably a better way of talking about it. I think there are some things that can you know, a person can be, for example, economically conservative but socially a little bit more relaxed about things. And I think personally, from observation and full disclosure, I'm not a member of the Liberal Party. I'm not a member of any political party. I'm obviously a conservative voter. But some conservatives get so bent out of shape when someone like me, for example, goes, well, I'm fiscally very conservative, but over here I don't care so much about that issue, whatever that issue may be. It's like, you know, it has to be a broad church in the simplest, simplest meaning of that phrase. And I personally think that it is always the economy. It is always the economy.
Well, I think it's the economy, but it's not only the economy, and
Correct.
Also the economy is sometimes downwind of culture. Daniel, I'll give you two examples. The global warming thing, we've started off really as not really about science, it's more a religion, and that's had profound economic effects, very bad ones. And also this idea of open society, open borders, let's not be racist, has allowed a mass immigration here that's overwhelmed our economy, in my view, and created a housing crisis.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I mean, certainly when we look at migration, and your previous guest was talking about the issues in the Netherlands and the economic cost, and you can see it here in Australia, where we've had 7 consecutive quarters of negative per capita growth, which is the biggest decline or the longest decline since digitised records began in the early 1970s. And that's because we've had a mass migration program without a plan, without the consent of the community, and without it being targeted towards areas of economic need. So mass migration makes Australia poorer. That's certainly what's happened. Now, big business and the universities and government love it because, you know, it makes GDP bigger, so it makes them sound like they're doing a good job with the economy. But as I say, on a per capita basis, our living standards are going backwards. And if you want to ease cost of living, the number one thing to do is to fairly dramatically cut immigration. That will make a difference straight away.
Gemma, I've got to ask what's wrong with some Labor people and their abuse of Peter Dutton. I mean, Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek has already had to apologise for calling him Voldemort, making fun of his skin condition, the loss of hair, you know, no eyebrows and all that. And then Albanese had to disown an attack on Dutton's wife by Victorian Labor officials. And now Labor's candidate for Dixon, Peter Dutton's seat, Ali France, sent out an email invitation to supporters for a potato night fundraiser, yet again mocking Dutton's appearance. Is this childish or is it good politics?
Well, it's puerile. I mean, it's puerile university-grade politics, and maybe that's what Australian Labor, all Australian Labor has to offer. It certainly would seem that way. I mean, the obvious hypocrisy of this mob that talks about, you know, a better kind of politics. We're just going to cuddle everyone and everyone's okay and I'm okay. And it's total BS. You know, the proof is in their behaviour, and the examples that you've just cited are horrible examples at the base level. It's just a really crap, it's just a really, you know, you're a really crappy human if you think that that's
Gemma,
a fun way to behave.
I've got to go. It is so sad. Gemma Tognini, Daniel Wild, thank you both.